I know I've told you this before, this little story, but I grew up in a devout Catholic family in a very small, basically industrial farm town in Indiana. And the one thing I think for me that was really of value in that experience of my growing up was that our catechism, which was our first lesson every morning in Catholic school, after we went to Mass, our first lesson was that God made us to know, love, and serve Him in this world. And I took that deeply into myself, and as a young person, like 6, 7, 8, 9, I really tried to love God. In part because the Catholic Church was so boring to have to go to every morning that the thing, and it was lucky for me, I discovered that I could make it meaningful by really trying to feel love. And through that trying to feel love, I found my heart, and I was able to open my heart and experience the love in me rising up out of my body to God. That was pretty cool, and I had some pretty far out experiences around that. After a while, I felt God loving me back. I did. I felt energy descending to my heart. Whoa, far out. So I kept doing it. And over time, the thing I came to understand was that the love in me and the love from God was the same love. It wasn't two things. It wasn't like out there and in here, or me and it. It was one thing. It taught me something very important about me. Something very beautiful. And so this town I grew up in, I was about 9,000 people. No Jews, no Chinese, no Asians at all, actually. There were 8 black families who lived in Connersville, and only later on did I understand why they all lived in the same 2-block area. As Catholics, in order to experience that love of God, we had to be, good doobies. We had to follow the rules. We had to, do all the things. And okay, I did all that. I ate only scrambled eggs on Friday, and I went to church so many times it would make your head spin if I told you the number. But in time, I came to see the people who were pushing the rules pretty hard, not actually following them, which I thought was a curiosity. And over time, somehow the fear of eternal damnation just didn't hold the same kind of threat that it had held as a young person. Because I saw the love within myself that light of love within myself, I saw it in everybody. I saw it in, the one African American kid in my Catholic school, who my teachers try to quietly hush, say, don't play with that kid. I saw there's this subtle thing in Catholicism, or at least in the Catholicism I was exposed to, which is there are lots of brown people who are Catholics, but we're not so sure they're really going to heaven. And the whole hatefulness, in a way, of sending somebody into eternal damnation for a cheeseburger on Friday? Are you serious? Over time, that just didn't do it to me anymore. But still, I was hanging out. I grew up in an all-white place, and everybody who was the same, we were cool. We were all going to heaven. It was all good. A little infraction here. Let's go to confession. We're absolved. No problem. But as I grew up, also I went to college. I lived in a fraternity house at Indiana University. So basically I was living with other guys my age who'd mostly come from small farm industrial towns like me, who played football and basketball in high school and dated cheerleaders. And we all lived together. And we drank beer. On special occasions, we drank scotch, Cutty Sark. Well, the reason I mention that is because I think, the only thing that's really good for is, besides poisoning you, is taking paint off the driveway. But in college, I met Jews. I met Asians. I met African Americans. I met African Americans who grew up in African American communities and had their own culture, basically. I met people who were not like me at all. And I had an African roommate for a while. He was the most beautiful human being I had ever met in my life to that moment. He was astonishing, physically so beautiful. He spoke about 14 languages. He played 6 different instruments, some of them, the traditional African instruments. He sang. We used to sit on the front porch of our house in Bloomington, Indiana, and he'd teach us African folk songs until 2 in the morning. It was astonishing to me then, coming from the place I came from. Slowly, I got it that there is this world that is full of beauty. This world that is beyond what I grew up in, which was available to teach me, about myself. There was this world that, I could participate in if I chose to. But I really had to, by then, quite honestly, I was really into it. I wanted to learn. I wanted to open my mind. I wanted to open myself to new experience. I wanted to grow. Because, living in that tiny world, well, then there's another thing that happened. The civil rights movement happened. And then the Vietnam War happened. And at the same time as they happened, I kind of discovered myself as a political activist and also realized that I had outgrown that fraternity. I outgrew that fraternity because as the rush director for that fraternity, I tried to pledge an African American football player who was a 4.0 All-American, linebacker prospect. I tried to pledge him, and in the meeting that we had to discuss pledges in the chapter, I saw hatred I had never seen in my entire life at the suggestion that this guy, who was more beautiful and smarter and more literate and a better athlete than 99% of the people in that room, I saw hatred at this expressed about this guy that really completely blew my mind. So I left. I quit that week and moved out. And at the same time, the hatred of that we were watching on TV, that we were seeing in the streets, directed at African American people, and the cynicism of the Vietnam War all came together on me. And after working real hard for a couple of years to try to change things in the world, and realizing at the end of that effort that I had completely failed, I returned again, sort of crushed actually. I returned again to that feeling in my heart that I held as a child to try to relocate me and all of this tumult that I was experiencing. And the thing that supported my experience of finding that good feeling within myself again, finding the experience of love in myself again, was a yoga practice. And how crazy is it that, in 1968, I had a math teacher who did yoga. This is in Bloomington, Indiana. This little guy, I don't know where he was from, Poland or someplace, but he was a yoga teacher, and he also, even if it was 30 below zero outside, he came to class in shorts and sat on the desk in a full lotus. So I took up yoga. And in doing yoga, I found within myself a way to get in touch with a simple, good feeling in me. And finding that simple, good feeling in me, I could begin to feel a flow of energy in my body again. I could feel my body. I discovered in experiencing that good feeling that this body is energy, and that I could change its state anytime I wanted. And so, at that point, I turned away from the cynicism and the hatred that was American culture in Indiana. That was also, I turned away from deodorant. I discovered I didn't stink. One of the revelations that, supported me in stepping out of American culture and into the experience of myself as a free and open being capable of shifting their state anytime they choose. This gave me the opportunity. Then I moved to New York, and this was in 1970, when, frankly, people weren't coming out of the closet. They were blowing the closet doors to smithereens. And living in New York in 1970, I discovered worlds beyond worlds from Indiana. I discovered, amazing people with unbelievable talent and skill and insight. People who were profoundly different than me and who lived completely different lives, and yet, had the capacity to connect to their own passion and had the goodness to be able to, anyway. So, where I'm going with all of this is, we live in a world that just gets more and more confusing and difficult as far as I can tell. This is my experience of it. It's more and more confusing and difficult. I had a Zen teacher who came, an old friend of mine who's a famous Zen teacher who was here a few weeks ago to visit me. And he was telling me about, because he's from the Bay Area, he's much more in touch with this movement and that movement, and the men who have left the men's movement to develop another movement, and I came to it, after he finished, I said, it would all be really simple if we could just respect each other. If we just respected each other, if we just understood that each of us gets to paint our own canvas, has to paint our own canvas. And painting that canvas with respect for our own life, with respect for others' lives, for their choices, whatever those choices might be. This is a difficult part because I have a lot of trouble respecting people like Donald Trump, The guy just drives me crazy. Maybe I'd like him better if he wasn't friends with Vladimir Putin, but Vladimir Putin kills everybody who says anything bad about him. And that makes me a little queasy. That's not my idea of tolerance. So, respect. Diversity is what will save the world, not a bunch of white people from Connersville. I promise you. It's diversity that will save us, will save our species, will save humans on the earth. And it is our ability to find a flow within ourselves, to connect to the fundamental goodness and fundamental love in us and bring that forward every single day, no matter how painful it is. And trust me, because I can tell you from deep personal experience, it hurts like shit sometimes. It hurts worse than shit. It hurts. But the truest human beings I know respond to the hurt and the confusion and the distress by finding their hearts and bringing forward the love within themselves to allow an expression of creativity which constantly brings together and heals. Living in all the intolerance, living in the confusion, living in the tension, living in the distress. What is that? What's the point of even living at that point? Each of us is human beings. Each of us has to find our own way. Each of us has a unique experience that we are drawing upon, and combining with a extraordinary and non-dual spiritual power that is our source to express a life that we hope is ever more deeply connected in beauty and love. Everything else is torture. The practice that we share, this work we do together, this work is about finding our hearts and dissolving the tensions and the boundaries of our hearts and minds, and seeing within ourselves and in one another a divine light which has the power to make this world, well, I should put it differently, to reveal this world as truly, profoundly beautiful. This work is the only work, this kind of work, I'm not saying my specific work, this kind of work is the only work that will bring you more energy and more benefit than every other kind of work you do. Because whoever it is you work for, whatever work it is you do, somebody is making a lot more money off of you than you are making doing that work. Period. Let's do this work. Let's, for the sake of our loved ones, dissolve the tensions and the boundaries and bring forward the beauty within ourselves to heal ourselves and to heal our loved ones, and hopefully in some way or another to bring some kind of healing to the world. It desperately needs it, desperately. Namaste.